Hello. Welcome. Thank you for having me. Have you ever thought about leadership? What do you think of when I tell you leadership? What do you think of when I say that word? I think there's a good chance that when I tell you leadership, you're thinking of some iconic characters, such as Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill, maybe you're thinking of Gandhi, maybe you're thinking of a man like Henry Ford in the business world, or Steve Jobs, or maybe you are thinking of Vincent Kompany. Why not? He's a leader in his own right. But have you ever thought about yourself as a leader? And how about that idea? Does it frighten you? Does it make you wonder? Well, you shouldn't, because you came here today and the subject of this conference is utopia. That means that by transformative ideas of today, we are going to shape the new world tomorrow. But if you want to ignite the future with your new idea, your crazy methods, your loony new technology, you will have to become a leader one day or another. The question is, are you ready for it? Are you up to that challenge? Now here's the good news. Today I came here to tell you about a superpower that all leaders have. I'm going to tell you in the next 15 minutes how you can acquire that superpower and how you can use it. Now, I myself, I'm a writer and a director. And when people ask me what I do for a living, I usually tell them that I am a storyteller. And it's exactly in the field of storytelling that I found the secret superpower of leaders. Now, when we think of leadership, we usually think of leaders in terms of modern time heroes. We think of them a bit as of ancient Greek gods, masters of fate even. But when we look at biographies of leaders, we discover that they have flaws also. They are disappointingly human in their weakness. So let's look at some of the qualities we think leaders have. For example, we have moral superiority. Superior moral judgment, knowing at all times what is good and what is wrong, what is right and what is wrong. Now, let's look at an example. This gentleman, Steve Jobs, he had a very peculiar habit. He had the habit of parking his car in the parking spot reserved for disabled drivers. Not so much proof of a clear judgment on his part, no? Well, for all his business vista, he had a considerable lack of empathy. He cared very much about his cars because he used to drive always new cars. And he'd read somewhere that cars that were parked in a handicapped parking spot weren't vandalized as much. So there's one thing, we see that leaders, when they acquire power, their moral judgment tends to be corrupted. It's biased by their personal interest. Maybe there's another quality to leaders that we should look at. We're attracted to leaders that have success. Then let's look at the example of Henry Ford. Henry Ford we know today as the father of the modern car industry, but did you know that Henry Ford, before he actually became a success, he filed for bankruptcy twice. It wasn't for the aid of some befriended entrepreneurs and bankers, he wouldn't have been the success we know him for today. In fact, many leaders we know are defined by one success, but that success is built on many, many failures. So there's a thin line between a leader and a loser. Now, maybe it is wisdom that attracts us to leaders. their knowledge. And why not? So let's look at a fine example of that. Winston Churchill. Here you see young Winston Churchill, but during his school days at Harrow's, he wasn't so wise at all. His school results were substandard, except for 2 subjects. He was good in 2 subjects, and those were literature and history. And in those 2 subjects, he acquired the skills he needed later on when he became a statesman, and he needed to inspire the people in times of great distress, like the Second World War, when he addressed the people during one of his great speeches. And that is exactly what distinguishes leaders from others. It is the power to make others follow them. Because all great leaders seem to have that secret power that makes other people follow them. And that secret power lies in storytelling, in the stories they tell to others. Now, it isn't so strange because one of the great men from my profession, Robert McKee, cornered this in a quote already, and he said, "A leader is someone who can translate and explain the world to others." And actually, we've been doing that since the beginning of time. We've been sitting around the campfire since the beginning of time, telling each other stories to transfer knowledge. Or we've been painting the stories on the walls of our caves, just to tell others what kind of livestock and what kind of food there's around. So it's deeply culturally embedded, but there's also another cause for that, and that's the cause that you see depicted here. This is actually a 3D scan of an actual functioning human brain, and what you see is that the brain, the moment it receives signals, the brain translates those signals into electricity, and the electricity gets transferred from one cell to another, forming change, forming these threads you see on the image. And these threads are actually the link between what you experience and what you know. So your brain is a story machine in itself. It takes in the information and it gives it a signification also. So if you want to inspire people, you have to use the story machine that's between their ears. And now you're wondering, well, that's all very fine, but how are we going to use it ourselves? Well, it's very simple. There's 2 basic rules to that, and 4 simple questions you have to answer to find out what story you should tell. The first rule is, it is not about you, it is about them. Them being the audience, them being your public. Because people don't come to see how genius you are, they come to feel and to know what they should do with their lives. And that brings along the second rule also, because what you should do with the audience is make them involved in your talk by giving them what they want, and they only want one thing, it is make me care. Make me care for what I'm hearing. Now, there's a very peculiar thing, because at school and in university, we are taught to argument our ideas in a rhetoric way, and to stress the qualities of our ideas, to focus on the qualities of our ideas, and to talk about that. But then, that way, your ideas start to look a bit like this guy. And nobody can relate to that, because nobody wants to look like that, I guess. Anybody wants to look like that? Okay. No, instead of that, you should give the audience something to care about. That's why at the heart of every good story, be it a business story or a fiction story, there is a promise. A story is a well-told promise. You should give the audience a promise, and you promise them something they can long for. At the heart of every story, there is an object of desire, what people can long for, that they can take along during your story. For example, in one of the things I do is writing detective stories, and what I make people long for is the solution of the mystery, of course. At the beginning of the story, I make them long for the end of the story, in which I reveal who actually was the villain or the murderer. So now how are we going to apply that to your case? Well, there's 4 simple questions you should ask yourself, and I'm going to give them to you now. So it is about the audience, and the first question you need to answer is, who are they? And you shouldn't be thinking of them like some socio-demographic data. No, you should be thinking of them like writers think about their characters. Writers, when they think about their characters, they most and for all love those people. So, and they forgive them their weaknesses also. And they think of them in a very concrete and real way. They imagine the universe they live in on a day-to-day basis. So they ask themselves where they buy their food, what they do for a living, how much they earn, what kind of houses they live in, what kind of books they read, what kind of clothes they're wearing. All those questions are answered and put in a very concrete portrait of a person. So that you should do, because you don't want to work for a collection of anonymous data. You want to work for real people, and you want to know why they make the choices they make. The second question you need to answer is, what's their pain? Where are they hurting? Because a good idea becomes only a useful idea when people actually need it. And to find out what people need, you need to think of the problems people are confronted with in their daily life. So that problem takes a very concrete form also. You should also think of that in a very real, day-to-day way. The third question you need to answer is, why is it important to them? Because you want to change something fundamentally to the lives of the people you work for. If you don't want to change something very fundamental to their lives, well, why bother anyway then? People are waiting for a solution for a problem. Every story should have a solution to a problem they are experiencing, and it should be a problem that is important for them enough to bother listening to your story. So make it important also. Pose yourself that question. Why is it important to them? And the last question is, how do you want them to react? Now maybe you think, well, I want them to jump up from their chairs and I want them to go out and buy my new product. Well, that's not going to happen. Because before people actually do that, they have 30 moments where they will have a choice before actually buying something. No, what you want after a story, the ideal reaction from an audience after a story is that they go out and recount your story, because that is what inspiration is. That is what creating a following is. A following is created by people who actually go out and recount the story of someone else. And in order for that to happen, your story has to be very clear, and you have to give them, at the end of your story, a very clear assignment. So that's that then. It's as simple as that. But now, at this point, we need to address a very, very, very big elephant that is in this room at this very moment. Because all this talk about storytelling is very good, but 1 month ago, our own utopia of living in a peaceful and rather prosperous part of the world was shattered, blown to pieces by a couple of lunatics with suitcases. And we shouldn't close our eyes to that, because, of course, those people too had their stories they believed in, and their stories they followed. And that's natural to a story, because a story is only a collection of words, and words can be manipulated. So indeed, stories can be propaganda, and stories can be manipulated. But rest assured, my friends, that the stories that will stick with us are actually the stories that will unite us. Not the stories of the villains, the antagonists, or the people that will bring us astray. No, the stories that will unite us are the stories that will stick to us. I'll give you one example. Nelson Mandela came to power after 27 years of captivity in South Africa. And he could easily, at that moment, have tapped into the anger and the feelings of revenge of the black population of South Africa just to consolidate his power. Instead, he did completely the opposite. He installed a truth commission. And that way, he gave a voice to the feelings, to the call of justice of the black people, as well as to the fear of chaos and the way they had to leave their power of the white people. So in that way, he constructed a new story with a new future that both could believe in, a story that they could be united in. And that is what distinguishes great leaders from the poor ones. They actually find out ways to make people care so much about a story that the people themselves want to take part of it. And that is my call to action for you today. Go out and ignite the world with your stories. And maybe you're thinking at this very moment, well, I'm not called to inspire the whole world. No, well, you shouldn't, because a story of the future, utopia, as was very well demonstrated by the story of Philippe van Parijs here this afternoon, is made one person at a time. You should inspire one person at a time. Because a story is a bridge between your vision of the future or your idea and what one other person can do to realize that vision of the future. So go out and tell people your own story. Make your own story happen. Because it sure as hell will beat the stories of terrorists and villains that want to destroy us and have no place for hope or future. Thank you very much.